Hey everybody, thank you for taking a stop here at the Palmetto Pit Stop. I am Tony here with Adam, and we are catching you up on the latest NASCAR news and nuggets, and we are just past Atlanta where we saw 11 cautions, a bit more in the way of what we were thinking and how the race was going to play out in the way of some drama out on the track, in the way of these cautions, in the way of wrecks, but just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, and this is where we are left, but we're ringing the bell again. Christopher Bell took home the win in Atlanta, so kudos to him. Solidifies that playoff position, but of course leaves a lot of other drivers wanting. Hocevar was very close there at the end. For the young buck, he almost got it. He was so close, but the way that things go, and this is something we could talk about here, Adam, to start. Everything played out in the race that made it very entertaining at times, but this did bring up, and I saw this on social media from a handful of people, something that should also be changed at some point in NASCAR again, and that is the final lap not being allowed to play out with the caution and to just have it go to the checkered flag. I know a lot of people have opinions on that, but again, the way it ended went to Bell. Could it have ended up with someone else? Hostfar could have got that first win, which would have been, again, first career for him. But, yeah, that's just the way things go sometimes with the current rules. What'd you think about how things panned out over in Atlanta?
So I think I have an interesting opinion on it, and it's not a unique one, but I thought in the moment, as a fan, I was watching and saw they were going to be three wide. It was going to be a repeat of last year at the line, like three wide at the line. I probably wouldn't have been as close because it looked like Hocevar was getting that run, and he had the advantage over Larson. Bell would have been, just the way it was positioned. It looked like Hocevar was going to be the one first to the line, get that first career win.
That's just like, all right, you go, man. I said not everyone's going to be happy for you, but I mean, just in the way of getting that first career win would have made it really interesting, but cut too short. And Bell's team knew he had the win once they had that caution, and that's just the way things played out.
It is. And while in that moment I was upset, I did I scrolled social media. I listened to a few drivers' opinion on the subject, and it did kind of make me realize it's like, yes, entertainment wise, it would have been a great thing to just let it play out green and race to the finish and just let the finish, the leaders play out and just let that happen as it would. And then as soon as they cross the line and the winner's decided, then you throw the caution and everyone slows down. But then a few drivers, Denny Hamlin namely one, he said it was the right decision because Josh Berry's car was sliding back up in front of the field from where he had crashed from, and it was more a decision made for driver safety, which is, of course, as fans, we watch the crashes and they're memorable, they're exciting at times. A lot of the times they produce some drama, as we saw the last 2 weeks. But these are still humans and we don't want them to get hurt. So I think it was smart to call a caution. Now looking back, now 5 days removed from the race, or 5 days removed from the race. And I think it was smart. It is a little frustrating. What I find to be frustrating is the inconsistency of when this is called, because at the Daytona 500, the leaders were crashing, and then William Byron and Tyler Reddick snuck by on the outside wall, and then they just let that race back to green when Tyler Reddick, he was on his own on an island. He's not getting a run to catch William Byron. It was one thing if he's in the draft or he has a car right behind him pushing him, and it's like, okay, let's see if he can catch him by the line. And then they didn't call the caution there. They just let it go green, waited till William Byron crossed the line, and then they waved the caution for the crash.
See, looking back to that race, that's the thing too. I thought that they were going to call it. That's why I was surprised with the end of that result, because I figured that would have ended like how Atlanta did. It would have ended with a caution, but again, just the way these things are determined in real time. Not everyone's going to always agree with it. Of course, safety is always going to be in mind for the drivers, but it's like, yeah, why couldn't have that been that decision too? But you're left with questions sometimes.
Yeah, we are, and NASCAR has made a lot of questionable decisions just since we've been doing this podcast. I mean, if you look back at our log of the last how many podcasts did we do at the end of the year? Like 14, I think. Because I think we started at Michigan. I think it was Michigan, Daytona, Darlington, and then the playoffs. So 13, about 13 races we covered.
Yeah, not of course the full season. But,
Yeah.
now we're diving into that starting out. But yeah, getting to that point of the later phases of last season, and then with any changes until now. So yeah, a reasonable point.
Yeah, about 13 races, and how many of them were we saying it's like, oh man, NASCAR really made a mistake here. They did this wrong. And I can't fault them so much for this, just because Atlanta is a 1.5 mile track. It is a drafting track now, and it races like how we want Daytona and Talladega to race, where it is drivers can get a run, and then, they make a mistake and then they fall back, rather than just sitting there and going half throttle for, the entire race until the final fuel run, or until the final fuel window. And I have a lot of love for this new Atlanta configuration, even though I did love old Atlanta. It still is a very exciting race. I think the issue is just inconsistency. At Daytona, I think it was just NASCAR heard too much noise about throwing the caution too soon. Excuse me. They heard too much noise about throwing the caution too soon, so they held on to the caution and they let the race play out, even though it didn't have to. William Byron was clearly the only survivor of that of the group of leaders who crashed. And like I said, Tyler Reddick wasn't getting that run on his own. And then at Atlanta, you have the three leaders battling each other off of turn 4 for the lead before the caution comes. And it's just the annoyance of inconsistency, but I think they got the Daytona call wrong, and I think they got the Atlanta call right. It is annoying, if we were robbed of that 3-wide finish, but still, you don't want these guys driving through each other. We saw it with, actually, Carson Hocevar a few years ago, where there was a big crash. I can't remember which track it was, but he was in the Truck Series, and there was a crash late in the race. Could have been on the last lap, and then he tried to drive through the crash to pick up positions, ended up breaking his foot because of it. And you don't want injuries for these drivers. So I think the Atlanta call, while controversial in the moment, and while I was not a fan in the moment, I think it was the right call long term. And if NASCAR is going to pick something to do, is like if the drivers are wrecking or spinning for 30th, and there are no danger to any other drivers, let it go green. No reason to throw a caution. But if there is a big crash in the middle of the pack, I think they crashed from 7th in Atlanta. If they are coming back onto the track and other drivers are at risk, then yeah, you have to throw the caution.
It's just a tough thing when you want to have these incredible photo finishes, though, and more dramatic ends to these races, because there's some key points in these races that people look onto. Of course, it's cool to have the stages and, your crash every now and again. Hopefully everyone is being okay with them, but just from that entertainment standpoint. But, the end of the race, everything that is, it's built up to at that point, and it's just tough to have that cut short. But, of course, you have to know where that fine line is. And, even as from a fan standpoint, understanding, all right, this is something, and that is a decision that is made by these people in real time, which is not the easiest thing all the time, because things are happening so fast. As these crashes are happening, you got to analyze and really make a decision right then and there. So we'll see if this is going to be something that comes along with more question mark as the season progresses. But that is how things ended up out one state over from where we are, over in Atlanta, Georgia. And, of course, that gave Bell the win. Hocevar got the silver medal. And then Larson picked up third place, getting some points there. Blaney in fourth. And Stenhouse Jr. rounding out things in that top 5. So, it's just the way things shake out sometimes. There was a lot of other drivers that could have had a little bit more success that day, but as we opened this up, and as I said, 11 cautions, there was a good handful of wrecks out there, a good amount of drama out in Atlanta between getting to the start and then finally getting into the end of this race, and it caused for, a good deal of shuffling amongst these drivers. So it was far from a clean race as we were thought it going to be. But hey, it made for a lot of interesting segments to this race, and not even just the segments within the stages, but for the race as a whole.
Yeah, I would agree. Atlanta is, I mentioned it before we started, Atlanta is the racetrack or the super speedway that we wish Daytona and Talladega would be, at least with the current gen car. At Daytona, we saw a lot of fuel saving. We saw these drivers try to make moves, and they'd go outside, and then they'd get hung out to dry immediately just because of the drag on the car. And then at Atlanta, you can build these runs, and you can make these charges to the front. Blaney got spun out and still, worked his way back up the field, finished fourth. So it was effectively, all well and good in the end. The ends justified the means there by the hosts of our move that spun him out. And then on the other end, you had Josh Berry, who was up there all day, won a stage. It was very exciting.
Oh, yeah, he was having a great day. Great run out there. Just
wrong place, wrong time.
Exactly.
Back there fighting on the last lap. And I think he might be one of the biggest losers of the season so far. It's only 2 races, but he had good runs at Daytona and Atlanta, and both of them nothing to show for it. Just the way super speedway and drafting tracks work. He's just, you could be running a perfect race and then you're just in the way of somebody else. We saw it pretty much every time we go to these tracks. And then you mentioned Ricky Stenhouse, a top 5 for him, which is not too unexpected. All of his career wins have come on super speedways. He's Daytona 500 champion. He won Talladega Fall last year. He is really good at these super speedways. You can't take that away from him. He's one of the guys, when you go to Daytona, Atlanta, Talladega, you're expecting him towards the top. Same with Cindric. Cindric's an interesting driver because he doesn't have that success on the intermediate tracks. I mean, he did have a win last year. Oh, what was that? Was that Iowa? Or was that... No, Blaney won Iowa. Where the heck did Cindric win last year? He won somewhere.
I was going to say, one of those tracks I cannot quite remember. With this long season, I mean, you're always going to have your marquee races and your crown jewels in the back of your head, but sometimes it just, sometimes we cobble some of these races together, especially in more of the Midwestern states. And it's not to lessen or of course, cast those races aside. They're as important just as anything else. Just sometimes, again, during the middle of the pack in the season, some of these races run together. I know you looked it up.
Yeah,
which one was it?
It was Worldwide Technology. That was out in the St. Louis track. Yeah,
St. Louis. Okay, yep, there you go.
Yeah, I totally forgot. I get that and Iowa confused a lot. I don't know how. But yeah, so Cindric, aside from that, and that came from, Blaney running out of gas on the last lap, or going into the last lap, he hasn't had much success outside of super speedway racing. But when it comes to super speedway racing, you could basically bank on Cindric getting stage points. He's always up there, always there towards the finish. And then, unfortunately, at Atlanta, had that run-in with Kyle Larson, who it's kind of impressive that Kyle Larson is up there with Max Verstappen as the greatest driver alive right now. And yet they will still make these rookie mistakes, because Larson did not have to door Cindric, and I don't think it's his fault. He admitted to it after the race. He's like, that was totally on me. It's interesting that these drivers who are so good at everything, there was, I don't know if you ever heard of this game, but there was a game back in the day, I think it was on the Wii, and it was called Jimmy Johnson's Anything with an Engine. It was basically a Mario Kart clone. But that's essentially what Max Verstappen and Kyle Larson do. Is you put them behind anything in an engine, they're going to go out and perform with it. And Larson, we've seen it more than Verstappen. Larson, he's doing the Indy 500 again this year. He races every dirt race he can. He has some chili bowls under him. And it's impressive almost that he does have these races where he'll be running really well. And credit to him for his best finish on a super speedway and a drafting track in general. He finally got that first stage win, so that probably means he's probably going to finally win a super speedway sometime soon. It's just interesting that they'll just keep making these moments. They'll just have temporary lapses in judgment, and then that unfortunately this past weekend resulted in a few drivers crashing and robbing Cindric of a good finish at the end.
Yeah, and it's just the way that it goes sometimes. There's always going to be, when you're going through the process of this race, and a couple good cars, sometimes getting into it a little bit too much up there at the front, and guys blocking, trying to jostle for position, and you're going to be seeing, someone who just can't keep their way up out in front of the lead of the pack, falter. or get bumped or run to the wall, spin out for some reason. And that's just the way that NASCAR goes. It's the way that sports go. Luck is such a big factor. Mistakes from other people can be such big factors that can impact you. And it's not always going to be the best car of the day that's running out there. You're not just all lined up in a straight line. This is not, this is not drag racing. This is not just like multiple thin strips of road that everyone's going in a straight line. It comes with the chaos, and that's just the territory of what this is, and why it makes for an interesting race. Because otherwise, depending on whatever goes with the analysis of these races, being able to understand the cars, Vegas it'd be a lot easier to be able to pick the winners. In that sense, but that's just not the case. Now, in terms of how we go about things and we change up and switch up these types of tracks and how they're run throughout the years, what also is a nice little wrinkle. And now, as we go on here, and as we get past, of course, some of this Atlanta drama, we can at least just have that little bit of a hint now that's coming up this weekend, where we're getting first road course. We're going to start to see more changes. It's not just fast and left anymore, and it does add that wrinkle that I truly love with NASCAR. I love the road courses. I love the Chicago street race. Everyone has their own opinions on what racing should be and what makes it what it is from a historic sense too. But I just love the little twists that come with that, and just the interest and intrigue that come along with it. Yeah, I wish it was more of a thing. Like I know not everyone's going to agree with it, because it definitely inconveniences people that live in cities where they set this up. I don't care if it's Chicago or Vegas or whatever other city. But it's so cool to see. I'm telling you. I love to see it. I do.
Yeah, I agree. I hope that we continue this street circuit trend that NASCAR's been doing with Chicago. I know there are rumors, and I don't know if it's has a lot of weight behind it, but San Diego is rumored as their next destination if Chicago is not a permanent, or at least a long-term addition to the schedule. I wish that we could find a way to combine the best portions of the early 2000s and 2010s racing of NASCAR and combine it with the way that NASCAR has approached the schedule recently. Because if they, we critique NASCAR a lot on the decisions they make. The decisions they have made to the schedule and to be more, to explore more tracks and explore more configurations, I have to really praise them. I mean, if you said in like 2006, be like, oh yeah, NASCAR next year, they're going to a road course on, the streets of Chicago, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, it's been the same schedule for the last like 10 years. What do you mean? And now it is like, okay, well, not only are they going to Chicago, maybe they might go to San Diego. Maybe they'll go to Sacramento, try to get the California market back.
How about Philly?
Yeah, okay. Those streets are narrow. They're not going anywhere on that. You'll have a repeat of the Formula One Monaco races. Just qualifying is what matters, because you can't get around anyone else.
Yeah, it'd be a little tough.
But
you can dream, though.
You can dream, yeah. You can go into these old NASCAR games like NASCAR 2004, where you had the New York City road course, the personal favorite of mine. But now, on top of that, you have COTA this week. We're going to COTA in a new configuration. You have, as much as I don't care for it, you have the Charlotte Roval. So they're using the interiors of tracks. And then the biggest one this season, they're going to Mexico City. They are venturing outside of U.S. borders again, which we haven't really seen since the early 90s, when they've raced in Australia, they raced in Japan. These are points-paying races outside of the borders, and it's really interesting to see because, what does that mean for the future? Are we going to go back to Montreal? I loved the Xfinity race. I think it was like 2006 or 7, where they went to Montreal. And I want to see, some of these tracks that we wouldn't probably see otherwise. And I'm very glad that NASCAR is looking into more of these different venues. And I'm excited to see what they bring back, because we've seen them go to Bowman Gray. We've seen them resurrect North Wilkesboro, and they've resurrected Rockingham. So, there could be tracks that don't exist anymore that they're fixing and they'll bring back. So I'm very excited to see what the future schedules hold. I'm hoping that the addition of these interesting tracks helps break up this schedule, because a big thing I saw fans talking about was like super speedway fatigue, and it is having Daytona and then Atlanta back to back. And as much as I love obviously the Daytona 500, and then as great as the racing has been at Atlanta, putting them back to back is a bit much.
It is. That's just the way that things are going to go, though, and the way the schedule shakes out sometimes. So we just kind of got to roll with it and enjoy things as they come, and break it down as it happens, as we love to do. But I'm still content with where we are at this point in the season. From a fan standpoint, widespread across, I'm sure, a few people wanting a little bit more, especially from a lot of your Hendrick car fans, obviously us with, 2311 drivers that we've come to know and love. So this is something that does, pose at least a little bit more of an opportunity for me. And this is something we'll get to when we go to our picks. But as we go now, we are headed to Texas. Oh, yeah, we are headed to Texas. So this is something where we're going to the Grand Prix, the Circuit of the Americas. Looking forward to it. And this is something where I know, obviously we're going to see some drivers that are going to be a little bit more up to par with road courses. Obviously, you got Mr. Van Gisbergen. I know, and this is something when I looked over the Vegas odds, and, I knew that Reddick was, pretty good on these types of courses, but he's actually third at the Vegas odds. I really do like him in this race. But sandwiched in between, guy maybe some people aren't as familiar with. This is something I want to focus on for this race, who has honestly some pretty reasonable odds and some really good skills coming into this that could push a little bit more of the field out and down, especially that aren't as skilled. They're, struggle a little bit more with road courses. And Adam, can we go into that a little bit right now?
Yeah, it was interesting when the odds came out that I saw Connor Zilic at second.
Connor Zilic.
Yeah, making his first career Cup Series start. He is coming in as the second favorite. And it was surprising to me. I can see the reasoning behind it, because he did go into Watkins Glen last year at the Xfinity. He just dominated the field. He put on an absolute clinic. Didn't leave any doubt in anyone's mind. He's like, oh yeah, he can win at these. But for second place, like as the second favorite, that's interesting. And I mean, if you're Trackhouse, you're pretty excited because you're two guys that you want to be the road course ringers. They're the favorites right now.
Like, how about that, right? 1 and 2, and that's just something that happens, just the way that they have formed their team, and they knew the talent that these guys had. Obviously, why they want them there. Yeah, I like that. We have road course ringers. They really are, and just having that confidence to have him as that much of a favorite, just going in with that first ever career start. But hey, the proof is in the pudding, I guess. But now it's more of a, got to actually show up and show out and be able to show that you can hang tough at this level of NASCAR. I don't doubt that he can do it. It's just, the confidence is there. It's like, all right, let's see what happens. It definitely adds a level of intrigue to this race. Anytime someone has the opportunity to win their first ever race, or they're a rookie or starting out for the first time, it makes it a lot more interesting. So we'll definitely be having our eyes on him as we get to this upcoming Sunday.
Yeah, and Trackhouse in general just has to be feeling great going into this race.
No doubt.
Of course, you have, like we said, the two favorites are Shane Van Gisbergen and Connor Zilic, but then Ross Chastain has also won at COTA, and he's never finished worse than 10th at COTA. He's never finished outside of the top 10 at COTA, I should say. And then Daniel Suarez, also very good on road courses. So 4 cars that they are fielding are going to do very well, or they have drivers who have proven that they can do very well at these road courses. If I'm Trackhouse, I'm very excited for this race. It's kind of one that I'm putting a lot of the eggs in my basket for. Hoping that one of these guys is going to get into victory lane. If it's one of the guys who you think might be a little less consistent throughout the year, that would probably help. Van Gisbergen, that's probably, that's going to be their bread and butter on the season. It's going to be these road courses while he figures out the ovals. Van Gisbergen's shown some promise at these ovals, but we're not going to see a true oval until Vegas in a few weeks. So right now, if you could just get that win and not totally lock yourself in, but basically lock yourself into the playoffs, that would, give you that little room to grow and sort of see what works on the ovals, because obviously you only have one road course in the playoffs this year. I would like to see what Connor Zilic does. I want to know why Vegas has such high hopes for him. And I'm hoping that whatever happens, we're getting what we expect to see out of Shane Van Gisbergen and Connor Zilic.
It's going to be an interesting look, and that's going to be something, of course, we're keeping our eyes on. Trackhouse this coming weekend with those guys slated up there. It still is on paper. Odds are odds. But I will say, for those that are into betting out there, one interesting little thing I've seen with these odds, and there are a lot of sports books that do offer it, some that don't. But even just if you bet on Shane Van Gisbergen, there's a top 5 option when you do NASCAR betting, right? So if you just bet on him that he'll finish in the top 5, it's plus 125. So that means if you bet $125 or $100, you bet $100 on Shane Van Gisbergen just to finish top 5, you'll win obviously that money back plus 125. So I don't know, not a bad bet. Not a bad bet. It's, of course, a little bit better than, just 50-50 odds, or when you're going basically, putting in your money, getting a little bit back. So, that seems to be a pretty good bet for the weekend. I know there's not a lot of folks out there. NASCAR is definitely one of the, least bet upon sports in a heavy sense. Obviously, you have your faction of bettors that do go the NASCAR way, but not as much as you're seeing for basketball or football, but just want to throw that little nugget out there for, anyone that happens upon this podcast that is a betting person and somewhere where it's legal. So,
yeah, I think NASCAR, I have personally never bet on a NASCAR race. When I lived in Pennsylvania where it's legal, I've bet on, football games, baseball games, that whole nine, but never a NASCAR race. I think the approach that a lot of people take to NASCAR is the fantasy aspect, where you have your drivers. I think it's 5 drivers, and then you have like 2 garage drivers, and you get points based on where they finish.
I see. I've never taken part in that ever.
I've never seen it. I am
interesting though.
I'm a part of a few Discord servers where people will talk about NASCAR and their fantasy, and they'll post it. And it's like, well, I don't know how this works, but I'm getting a good idea of how it works. Because, last week, for example, Chase Elliott gets into a crash, and a lot of people start, swapping him out for Josh Berry in their garage. And it's like, okay, now I need Josh Berry to do well. And then Josh Berry crashes at the end. Chase Elliott ends up fixing his car. They made that swap, and, it ended up biting them. But then you have someone who, had a sleeper pick, like Ricky Stenhouse. They had Ricky Stenhouse in their garage, they put him in, and now, they got a lot of points off it. So it's an interesting approach. Not an expert by any means. I've never even played NASCAR fantasy before. But, I think that is the more popular way, just because NASCAR is so what is the word I'm looking for? It's so unexpected. It's so unpredictable that you could be leading the entire race. You could lead 399 out of 400 laps, and then turn 4 on the white flag, you cut a tire. And it just, it's way different than a sport like football or baseball. You go into the 9th inning in baseball and you have a 30-run lead. You're coasting.
You get a little bit more of a payoff for past success that you have throughout a contest. Yeah, NASCAR, no, it doesn't. Doesn't matter.
NASCAR has almost decreased the success you get, or the payoff you get off of success or a whole race, with the stage resets. You know?
Now again, that's still just for the race in itself.
Yeah.
Like, obviously you'll get long-term success. So you'll get a payoff, you'll get points, things towards the playoff. But no, if you're just looking to win a race, then no, it doesn't matter. It's all about everything in real time. And anything that can go wrong can go wrong. Sometimes it's just because someone makes a mistake or bad luck. But yeah, that is definitely an interesting facet to NASCAR that makes it a little different from, a lot of other typical sports or team sports out there.
Yeah, it really does. And that's why, not to, again, we're in February still, not to bring up the playoffs, but it's why I believe that the playoff argument is kind of null, because it is just such a unique sport. NASCAR isn't football. NASCAR isn't baseball. It's one thing in the NFL where the Giants went on that run in 2007 to beat the undefeated Patriots. Like, yeah, that's one team playing one team. It's not all 32 teams playing each other at once, and then last guy standing wins. So much different, but it definitely is an interesting aspect that I don't know if I don't know how I don't want to say profitable, but like I'm sure it has to pay out a decent bit if you're able to predict the winner every week, just because NASCAR is so unpredictable. I mean, no one thought. I can't imagine the reaction in casinos when last year someone might have put money on Joey Logano to win Richmond, and then Austin Dillon dive bombs him in turn 4. It's like the equivalent of a Hail Mary at the end of a football game.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely a lot of folks out there, especially that are out in Vegas, because those sports books are so cool. They really are. Prime sports viewing out in Vegas. I love it out there. That's one, again, just something else to add to the list of why I love it out in Sin City. But yeah, no doubt about it. Just really getting pissed about that. If you're just about to win thousands of dollars. For a bet you put down, then boom, something like that happens. But that's the thing. There's just NASCAR's so volatile. So anytime I've been out there or even had the opportunity, like I've been on horses a couple times, but never race cars. But just a little interesting facet that, and this is just also something I'm throwing out there. The interest in a lot of sports is already very high between football, more college as well, basketball too. But with NASCAR trying to maybe bring in more bettors, because I've seen sports betting pushes everywhere from not even just sports entities, but from media outlets as well, between Fox and ESPN. ESPN has their own betting platform now, ESPN Bet. To try and get more people interested in sports, to try and get more people to throw money at sports in the way of wagers. That's just where we are. What?
They used to have like Fox Super 6 or something, where it was like win $1 million of Terry Bradshaw's money. NASCAR was Clint Boyer's money.
I think they still do that. But I mean, even just to have the platform on to bet in sports in some way. So that's one way that these outlets are trying to bring in some interest to sports. Like, hey, if you just love gambling, do it this way. Turn your eyeballs to sports. So, which means it can be more money for everybody. For sponsors as well. So that's why I just want to throw that into the conversation, because it is something, and it's an opportunity to bring in fans from another aspect. They aren't just watching strictly for NASCAR, but want to find another way to throw money at something. Because some people just love to bet, and some people have more money than they know what to do with. So it's just a little interesting aspect of that, especially for something unpredictable as it can be with these races, but perhaps a little bit more with these road courses. And that's what we're looking on to now. It's narrowing down a little bit of a field when we get to these road courses and some of the races that are more successful. Obviously, the guys we mentioned previously, Reddick, he's been good. Elliott's been good. He has, of course, couple good successful races up at WGI, our former stomping grounds up in the southern tier of New York. So yeah, Allmendinger, would expect him to be up there before all is said and done on Sunday. But it's still more of a handful of NASCAR drivers that truly find more success at road courses. It just is it's an acquired skill. It really is. Not everyone is good at it. Some guys maybe could just luck their way through it with a bad wreck or something, but it really is a little bit more narrowing of a field of who you anticipate is going to be there in the top 10 or even top 5 of drivers. But of course, we'll see what plays out as we're going to this one now, adding another early wrinkle in the NASCAR story for the year. But early thoughts for this race, anyone other than that in particular you're looking at? I know that they've added some changes that I've seen a couple articles pop out that I need to dive into more. They've been trying to enhance not just the course, but things for the fan experience there with COTA as we go into this.
Yeah, it looks like they are using the shorter version of the racetrack, so they're cutting off a big portion of the road course at COTA. They're shaving it down a little bit. They're using a new set of tires to hopefully make the racing a little closer. In this next-gen car, the road course racing hasn't been great. There's been a few road course races that have been very exciting, but they have mostly been either Chicago or just the result of a good finish, like we saw at Watkins Glen last year, or we saw at COTA when Ross Chastain won. Just a product of the last lap. But I'm really hoping, I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that the road course racing will be a little better this year. I want to keep an eye on Christopher Bell. He has done really well. He's a great all-around driver. I think he's one of the best drivers in the sport, but that's not really a hot take at this point. He can do just about anything. As speaking of doing anything, you could take just about any of the guys at Hendrick and say the same thing about them. Any of those guys could end up winning Sunday. And same with, I feel like with Joe Gibbs, I haven't seen what I've been hoping to see so far out of Briscoe, but it's also been super speedway races. As we mentioned, they're unpredictable. But we're going to have to see how that season shapes out for him. We don't get to a true oval, until a few weeks into March. So the NASCAR season, it's going to take a little bit to shape up, but I'm very excited to just watch how this race plays out. We have a lot of guys who are part-time drivers who are racing. We have guys who are full-time road course ringers like Van Gisbergen, like Allmendinger, who just, they're okay on the ovals, but they're really, really good when it comes to turning right. And I'm very excited. And while we were talking about sports betting, it was a good segue to Tony. Who do you think is going to be coming out in victory lane this weekend?
See, I'm not going anything too crazy with curveballs with this. Just looking at the field, looking how things are going to shape up. Not really going out anything too crazy with these suggestions and with these predictions. So I've already had my 3 drivers in mind. And, of course, Mr. Van Gisbergen is going to be my number 1. Number 2 is going to be Tyler Reddick, and then my number 3 is going to be Mr. Elliott. I think that they are all going to have a really good shot of bringing home that checkered flag. I'm really impressed with their past performances on these road courses, and that is going to be my picks. Nothing too far down the list. No true wild card for me with this one. It's just, and looking over the odds, it's just, I don't want to combine things too much with over-analyzation of these races and not just picking drivers because they're the favorites. It's just because I truly believe they have the capacity to navigate their way through the field and find more success with this particular course. So that's what I'm going to go with. Van Gisbergen, of course, it's the safe pick. Number 1 in the odds. Reddick, my number 2 pick. And then Chase Elliott, my number 3. For who's going to be taking it home and grabbing the next playoff spot. How about you, Mr. Adam?
So I think I will be going out a little bit on a limb for some of my picks.
That's okay.
But my first one, obviously the safest, I just mentioned him, Christopher Bell, runner-up last year at this race. It is a different setup, but same talent still required. I think Christopher Bell, he could go back-to-back, really lock in that playoff spot.
That would be impressive.
Yeah, it would. And, he's just such a great racer. He's probably one of the most complete guys on the circuit right now. I really like what I see out of him. Really, as a Tony Stewart fan growing up, seeing that 20 car in victory lane a lot. It's, even though I'm not a Christopher Bell fan, it is still nice to see. So he'd be my first pick. Second pick is a guy I mentioned earlier. I think Ross Chastain never finished worse than, I believe, 7th at this race since they've been coming here since 2021. He could end up being a guy who is just right place, right time, get a second win at the track. I would have to double check, but he would probably... I'm willing to go out on a limb and say he'll be the first multi-time winner at COTA, but again, not sure because I haven't looked at the stats of that. But I think Chastain, he's a very talented driver. Missed the playoffs last year, got that win in Kansas during the playoffs. I think a win at COTA would take a lot of weight off of Trackhouse's shoulders just to get at least one car locked in. And now for the last pick, he is going out on a limb. I want to go with Michael McDowell. So Michael McDowell had an interesting week at Atlanta. He had, I believe it was fuel pump issues, went 6 laps down, ended up making all 6 laps back under the lucky dog system, ended up finishing 13th. A very, very determined and incredible drive to end up with points where a lot of people would just hope, to crash out of the race and have to get to go home. So very good effort on his. He's on a new team, statistically hasn't excelled yet, but he did have a win at the Indianapolis road course a few years ago, and he has shown he could do very well at these road courses. Only 2 career wins to this point, but I think it would be interesting for if you're in, your first year on your new team, you want to go show off, go ahead and win a road course. There's no doubt in anyone's mind. If you get a win on a super speedway, just by, being there at the end, you could chalk that up to luck. You could chalk it up to strategy, whatever. If you get a win on a mile and a half, same thing. But if you do it on a road course, there's no doubt. It's like you were there. You are the one leading the race to that point. Because very rarely do we see these road courses come down to last second passes. But Michael McDowell, I think, has a chance to do well at COTA. So again, 3 picks for this: Christopher Bell, Ross Chastain, Michael McDowell.
All right. I like it. I said going just a little bit more on a limb with those. I thought that you might want to go with Mr. Connor Zilic, but that's all right.
I was thinking about it, but I felt it would be too predictable for an out there prediction. Might be a little, unusual pick. Now I'm going to pick it.
I was gonna say. I mean, it is going to be interesting to see how his day goes, though. But I like your picks. I like your reasoning. Just felt like going a little bit safer, just to the point of what I've watched, and honestly, but before we really got into this, I really feel like a lot of the NASCAR tracks did see a couple at COTA. Obviously, was always watching WGI, living in New York. Got to go to a couple of those races, and a lot of them I got to watch were road course races. So just made me really appreciate them a little bit more, just helping me get back into NASCAR as an interest. But overall, yes, I like that as we're going to be rounding this out and as we're going to be setting our predictions. And also, speaking of rounding out, the final turn, Mr. Adam. Am I good to take this one away right now with my topic?
The floor is all yours.
All right, so interesting thing that I read from this past race as we were going through it, and this is from the publication AJC. That is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It is a great, print media organization. They've been around there a long time. They do a lot of different features between, what they've expanded from print, because of course they have their own big digital footprint now. But one article that they had was actually highlighting former college football players that have made their way into NASCAR and pit crews. We already saw this from a former Penn State alumni, Journey Brown. He was on Zane Smith's pit crew, I believe.
Yeah, I believe he was in the Xfinity Series for Trackhouse, and then occasionally would be fielded for Cup races for Zane Smith.
All right, so from that standpoint, this article highlighted 4 or 5 different players. I just picked a couple of them out of here, so I'm not just listing names, but basically for what NASCAR has been looking at, what these teams have been looking at, trying to find guys that have been just a little bit more athletic or speedy or have some type of college athleticism from playing Division I sports. And when you think about it, it's like, oh, yeah, okay, this could be a little bit interesting. Obviously, you have to be, very much so an able-bodied person and be pretty strong when you're going to be out there being in a pit crew. It takes a certain level of physicality. So the thought process with that is, and the way that some of these guys have found their new homes and jobs is, hey, you're a former college athlete. You're not doing anything in the pros, but of course we know that you have that base of athleticism and speed and strength. How would you like to be on a NASCAR pit crew? So that is something that we've seen from a couple former players, and maybe that's going to be something we see more in the future. Shout out to a couple guys. Of course, we're recording this in South Carolina, but a couple former SEC guys. Nate McBride, he was a former inside linebacker from Georgia. And another one was Blaine Anderson, and he was a former defensive back at Alabama. Now, see, it listed the names, but it didn't go into the teams that they are represented by. But this is something, of course, that I was just going through. It wasn't a full written out article. And, of course, to watch the whole video, which is a minute and a half, you had to subscribe. I didn't feel like subscribing, but just to have that interest, and I want to dig into this a little bit more. This is just a little interesting nugget I wanted to bring up now, that yes, you could possibly see maybe one of your former favorite athletes that didn't go pro, maybe end up in NASCAR on the way of a pit crew, and that could open up the realm for some fans or college fans to maybe just, to latch onto that person and be a fan of that driver just because they have a a former college player on their pit crew. And this might not be something that people have really looked into that much, but I did find it very interesting, especially, going back to someone that we knew that was a good Penn State athlete that ended up being a NASCAR pit crew. So it's not the first time this has ever happened, but perhaps this is something we'll see a little bit more. Former college athletes turning to NASCAR to work in pit crews. So something to keep our eyes on. I'd like to look into this a little bit more when I have the time.
Did you happen to have the name of the person who wrote that article, by the way?
Yes, I did. Hold on a second.
Yeah. I really did like knowing. It was such a jarring thing for me because I didn't know it was a pipeline almost of, athlete who wasn't able to go pro or didn't go pro. Oh, they're gone for a few years from the public eye. Oh, now they're back in NASCAR. And it was really great for me because, as you mentioned, Journey Brown, I absolutely loved him at Penn State. One of my favorite athletes who I've been able to watch as a student. And then, it's a story of, oh man, what could have been. And then suddenly I get a news article where it's like, oh, he's actually on a pit crew for Trackhouse. So.
I have it, by the way. Sorry. Sarah Spencer is her name.
Spencer.
From AJC, from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Yeah, all right. Well, that is a very, very interesting and niche, but something to keep an eye on, definitely, because you could see, like you said, a lot of players who don't go pro, because there are great college players who just can't get that last little bit to go over the threshold into an NFL player. And it's not the end of the world because clearly they're finding success in these cup teams.
I would just love to see it, and this might be a pipe dream. It might not ever happen, but if there's enough players to, just show off more of their college colors and let people know, hey, I'm here. And maybe it could try to siphon a little bit of a college football fan base into a certain driver's fan base. Again, good marketing ideas that might not ever happen, but just want to throw that out there because I found it interesting.
Listen, there was a car, I believe it was in 2015 or 2014, but Jeff Gordon, when he raced at Pocono, fielded a Penn State car.
Oh, yeah, so I saw it. I saw a little die cast.
Yeah, it is not entirely out of the realm of possibility that one of the guys, I can't remember for the life of me, he is on a cup team and he played at Clemson. They race at Darlington. Clemson sponsors that car. That'd be a really good for exposure for the sport, a really good story for that guy.
Yeah, it's honestly more mutually beneficial at that point, and to try and be like, hey, there's a Clemson car. Or, hey, just bringing in a fan base from a certain school, and maybe just someone who's never even watched the NASCAR. It's like, oh, that's interesting. I could tune into that.
Yeah, it's
maybe
like, I'll
every
root
week.
for my guy.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Last thing we'll need, though, is to have to watch the Alabama Crimson Tide win at Talladega,
I know, right? But I mean, it's
one
not,
more way we have to watch them win.
It's not, it's not out of the realm of possibility.
No, and I think it, in a neutral standpoint, I think it would be very interesting to see more colleges sponsor teams. I mean, we see it with Liberty University and
That's
William
right.
Byron.
Yep, got that one.
Granted, not a football partnership more, because I believe that is his alma mater. So it's, colleges exist in the realm of sponsors for NASCAR. I would like to see, if the opportunity presents itself, oh yeah, I did go to, Delaware University, like Joe Flacco's alma mater, and when they go to Dover, it'd be nice to, slap him on one of the cars.
I mean,
Just
he's
so
one of the big reasons I know that they're the Blue Hens. So, it's just something to bring attention to a certain state or a certain school. And again, just whether it is going to be on a small scale like that or a really big scale like your Alabamas or your South Carolinas or your Penn States or your Ohio States or your Miamis of the world, whatever. It'd be interesting to see if that's something that could happen, especially between the driver or, again, guys in your pit crew that are former athletes that, might be recognizable or perhaps have their own social media following. So everything with that, I just found it a very interesting read coming out from Atlanta. Thank you again, Sarah Spencer, for having that piece. Sorry I didn't subscribe to watch it, though. So I think it was like a few bucks. I don't know.
No, yeah.
I don't know.
For all the articles I read from the Athletic that I should probably sponsor, or I should subscribe to them by now, I still don't. So
yeah.
I completely understand your reasoning. But yeah, I think we are going into Coda with a full head of steam. Very different racing expected, obviously, from the last few weeks. And we're still, after Coda, still about 2 weeks away from our first true oval race. So an interesting start to the season. After Coda, we look ahead to Phoenix. A good way to get a little idea of who is going to do well during the championship finale when they go back to Phoenix, but still a long ways away. Very excited for this long season ahead, and everyone watching, or listening, I should say, at this point. Everyone listening for our first full season of Palmetto Pitstop.
I know. Yeah, it's nice to actually settle in early in the season and not try to pick this up during the middle of the year. And, we can have this as we're rolling along, we're transitioning. We hope to be out there and do some live capabilities and gather content at Darlington. And this is something, of course, as we go through the rest of the year, we can hopefully just continue to expand on, especially past just more of this audio format. But Coda's coming up. Just going over it again one more time, Mr. Adam, your picks.
My picks: Christopher Bell, Ross Chastain, Michael McDowell.
Okay, and for me, Mr. Shane Van Gisbergen, Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott. We'll see who's right. We'll see who's wrong. And yet again, thank you, everybody, for pulling into the Palmetto Pit Stop. Appreciate you for being here. Please like and subscribe to us on YouTube. Continue to, of course, follow us, interact, tell your friends, your family, whatever you need to do. And we will see you next time.